I've always been a pretty curious guy. Ever since I was a kid, I loved to explore the unknown, dive headfirst into mysteries, and unravel secrets. But sometimes, that curiosity can get you into trouble. And sometimes, it can ruin your life. This is my story of how the dark web, that hidden corner of the internet, where nightmares become reality, did just that. It all started when I moved to a new city for a job. I didn't know anyone, so I spent most of my evenings online. You know how it is when you're in a new place and have too much time on your hands. I started off watching movies and playing games, but I soon found myself on Reddit, falling down endless rabbit holes of information. One night, I stumbled upon a thread about the dark web. People were sharing their experiences, some saying they found cool things, others sharing horror stories. I'd heard about the dark web before, of course, but I'd never ventured into it myself. The idea of exploring it thrilled me. It felt like the modern-day equivalent of opening a forbidden book of secrets. I wanted to see what it was all about. I found a guide on how to access it. It seemed simple enough. Download Tor, use a VPN, and keep your identity hidden. I followed the instructions carefully, setting everything up with a mix of excitement and anxiety. I felt like I was entering a new world, a place where the rules of the regular internet didn't apply. Once I was in, I started browsing various sites, mostly out of morbid curiosity. There were forums for conspiracy theories, hidden marketplaces, and even some bizarre chat rooms. I avoided anything illegal or too sketchy, just browsing around to see what was out there. But then I stumbled upon something that piqued my interest, a site called The Velvet Room. The Velvet Room was a simple web page with a black background and a single red velvet curtain as its header. It had a chat function and a link to a members-only section. The tagline read, "Where the darkest secrets come to light." My heart raced. It sounded like something out of a horror movie, but my curiosity got the better of me. I entered the chat room, where people were talking about all sorts of weird and creepy stuff. Urban legends, ghost stories, and supposed cursed videos. It was a strange mix of the curious and the deranged. I was just about to leave when someone with the username Mr. Shadows sent me a private message. "Hey, new here?" he typed. "I can show you the real stuff if you're interested." I hesitated. Part of me wanted to ignore him and log off, but another part wanted to know more. Against my better judgment, I replied, "What do you mean by real stuff?" Mr. Shadows responded quickly. "I can give you access to the members-only section. It's where we share the really interesting content. Videos, documents, things you won't find anywhere else." I should have said no. I should have logged off and never returned. But I didn't. Instead, I found myself asking how to join. "It's simple," Mr. Shadows explained. "I'll send you a link. Just follow the instructions and you'll have access." Without thinking it through, I clicked on the link he sent. It took me to a page where I had to fill out some information, including my email and a username. Once I submitted the form, I received a confirmation email with a password to access the members-only section. When I logged back into the Velvet Room, everything was different. The site had a new interface, darker and more ominous. It had categories like strange rituals, unexplained phenomena, and lost media. I was both horrified and fascinated as I scrolled through the lists of files. The first video I clicked on was called The Whispering Forest. It was a grainy video of someone walking through a dense, dark forest at night. The only sound was the crunching of leaves and the person's heavy breathing. As they walked deeper into the forest, whispers began to fill the air. They were faint at first, but grew louder and more intense. It sounded like multiple voices speaking in different languages, all overlapping each other. The camera panned around, showing nothing but trees and shadows. Then, abruptly, the whispers stopped. The screen went black for a few seconds before cutting to a new scene. A close-up of a face, eyes wide open in terror, mouth sewn shut with thick black thread. The image was so sudden and horrifying that I almost dropped my laptop. I slammed it shut, heart pounding, trying to shake off the fear that had gripped me. Despite my better judgment, I opened my laptop again and kept browsing. Each video was worse than the last. Horrific scenes of violence, strange rituals, and bizarre experiments that made my skin crawl. It felt like I was watching someone's twisted nightmare, but I couldn't look away. One video, in particular, haunted me long after I closed my laptop that night. It was called The Dollmaker's Secret. It started with a man sitting at a workbench, surrounded by lifelike dolls. He was meticulously painting their faces, humming softly to himself. But as the camera zoomed in, It became clear that these weren't just dolls, they were too realistic, too detailed. I felt a knot form in my stomach as I realized the horrifying truth. The man picked up one of the dolls, showing it to the camera. Its eyes were disturbingly lifelike, and its skin had an unnatural pallor. Then he did something that made my blood run cold. He opened the back of the doll's head, revealing a mass of electronics and wires, along with what looked like a human brain. I couldn't take it anymore. I shut down my laptop and sat there in silence, trying to process what I'd just seen. I felt sick, like I'd peered into the abyss and something had stared back at me. I knew I should have stopped there, but my curiosity got the better of me once again. Over the next few days, I found myself returning to the Velvet Room, each time delving deeper into its dark secrets. I watched more videos, read disturbing documents, and engaged in conversations with other members. They shared stories of strange encounters and unexplained phenomena, blurring the lines between reality and fiction. But then, things started to get weird in my own life. I began receiving anonymous emails with cryptic messages like, "We know what you've seen," and "The truth is closer than you think." At first, I brushed them off as pranks from other members of the site, but they kept coming, each one more unnerving than the last. One night, as I was walking home from work, I noticed a figure following me. It was just a silhouette at first, keeping a distance but never straying too far. I quickened my pace, my heart pounding in my chest. When I finally reached my apartment, I locked the door behind me and checked the windows, but the street was empty. I tried to convince myself it was just paranoia, a result of watching too many disturbing videos, but the feeling of being watched persisted. It was like a shadow lurking at the edge of my vision, never fully revealing itself, but always there, waiting. Then, one night, I woke up to a noise in my apartment. It was a soft, scraping sound, like something being dragged across the floor. My heart raced as I crept out of bed and grabbed the nearest thing I could use as a weapon, a heavy lamp. I slowly made my way toward the living room where the sound was coming from. As I reached the doorway, I saw a figure standing in the darkness. It was a tall, thin man wearing a long coat and a wide-brimmed hat, his face obscured in shadow. In one hand, he held a knife, its blade glinting in the dim light. I froze, unable to move or speak. The figure tilted his head slightly, as if studying me, then turned and walked through the wall. I stood there, stunned, my mind struggling to comprehend what I'd just seen. When I finally snapped out of it, I searched the entire apartment, but there was no sign of an intruder. The doors and windows were still locked, and nothing was out of place. It was like the figure had never been there, but I knew what I'd seen. The next day, I received another email. It was a video file this time, with no subject or message. Against my better judgment, I clicked on it. The video was a compilation of clips from the Velvet Room, but there was something different about it. In each clip, I noticed a figure lurking in the background, watching the camera with an unsettling intensity. It was the same figure that had been in my apartment. I realized then that I'd gone too far, that I'd seen something I wasn't supposed to. The dark web wasn't just a place of twisted curiosities and strange phenomena. It was a gateway to something far darker, something that had taken an interest in me. I wish I could say that I immediately stopped going to the Velvet Room, that I deleted everything and moved on with my life, but I didn't. My curiosity was like a parasite, feeding off my fear and drawing me deeper into the darkness. And that's when things really started to go wrong. After that night, things took a turn for the worse. The sense of being watched, the feeling of eyes on me whenever I left my apartment, became constant. I was jumpy and paranoid, barely sleeping and always looking over my shoulder. I started to wonder if maybe I'd triggered something by watching those videos, like some cosmic rule I'd unknowingly broken. The emails kept coming, each more cryptic and threatening than the last. They started including personal details about me, things only someone close would know, my routine, my workplace, even the color of the shirt I'd worn the day before. Whoever was sending them was watching me closely, but I didn't know who to trust or where to turn. Then, one evening, I received an email with an attachment titled, "The Invitation." I hesitated, my finger hovering over the mouse, but in the end, my curiosity won out. I clicked on it, and the file opened to reveal a video. The video was shot in night vision, casting everything in an eerie green hue. It showed a group of people in a dimly lit room, wearing masks that concealed their faces. They were performing some kind of ritual, chanting in a language I didn't understand. At the center of the room was a circle drawn in what looked like blood, with strange symbols surrounding it. As I watched, one of the masked figures looked directly at the camera, and even through the grainy footage, I felt as though they were staring straight at me. Their eyes were cold and empty, like they could see through the screen and into my very soul. The chanting grew louder and more intense until it abruptly stopped. The figure stepped forward, removed their mask, and revealed a face I recognized all too well. It was me. I recoiled, my mind reeling with confusion and fear. How could it be me? How could they have footage of me participating in this horrific ritual? My hands trembled as I slammed the laptop shut. I felt like I was losing my grip on reality, like everything I knew was being twisted into some nightmarish reflection. The rational part of me wanted to believe it was some kind of elaborate hoax, but deep down, I knew there was more to it. The paranoia grew worse after that. I started seeing the figure from my apartment everywhere I went, always lurking in the periphery, watching but never approaching. I'd catch glimpses of him in store windows, reflections in puddles, and even the darkened corners of my room. It was like he was haunting me, a constant reminder of the darkness I'd let into my life. Desperate for answers, I tried reaching out to other members of the Velvet Room. I posted in the forums, asking if anyone else had experienced something similar. Most responses were dismissive or mocking, treating it like a joke. But one user, someone called Elysium, sent me a private message that caught my attention. "You've opened a door that can't be closed," they wrote. "The Velvet Room isn't just a website, it's a gateway. It draws in those who seek forbidden knowledge, and once you've seen what it has to offer, there's no turning back. The figure you see is an observer. They're drawn to those who delve too deep, serving as a warning and a guide." I asked Elysium what I could do to make it stop, to sever whatever connection I'd made, but their response was cryptic. "You must confront what you've awakened. Only by facing it can you hope to escape." I didn't understand what they meant, but I had no choice but to try. That night, I waited in my apartment, every light turned off, and sat in silence. I wanted to face the observer, to confront whatever darkness had seeped into my life. The hours ticked by, the shadows in my room growing longer and more oppressive. Just when I thought nothing would happen, I heard it. A soft whispering, like the sound from the Whispering Forest video. It was faint at first, but grew louder, filling the room with its eerie cadence. I stood up, heart pounding, and followed the sound to my living room. There, standing in the corner, was the observer. His presence was overwhelming, a void that seemed to swallow the light around him. I took a deep breath and stepped closer, my fear almost paralyzing me. "What do you want from me?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. The observer tilted his head, and for a moment I thought he might answer. But instead, he reached into his coat and pulled out a small black box. He placed it on the floor and gestured for me to open it. I hesitated, unsure of what to expect, but something compelled me to comply. With trembling hands, I knelt down and opened the box. Inside was a USB drive, plain and unassuming. The observer pointed at my laptop, silently urging me to plug it in. I returned to my laptop, heart racing, and inserted the USB drive. A single file appeared on the screen, labeled Truth. I clicked on it, and a series of documents and videos unfolded before me. The first video showed a man, his face obscured, speaking directly to the camera. "If you're watching this, it means you've been chosen," he said. "The Velvet Room is more than just a collection of horrors. It's a test, a way to find those who seek the truth behind the veil of reality." The documents detailed a secret society, one that used the Velvet Room as a recruiting tool. They believed in exploring the darkest corners of human nature, pushing the boundaries of what was possible. They sought out those who showed a willingness to confront the unknown and offered them a choice: join or be consumed by the darkness they'd unearthed. The final video was the most disturbing. It showed members of the society in a dimly lit room, much like the one from The Invitation. They were performing the same ritual, chanting and moving in sync. But this time, the camera panned to reveal the figure I'd seen in my apartment, the observer. He stood at the edge of the circle, watching silently, his eyes locked on the camera. The video ended abruptly, leaving me staring at the blank screen, my mind racing. Everything I'd seen, everything I'd experienced, had been leading to this moment. The observer was waiting for my decision, for me to choose whether to embrace the darkness or fight to escape its grasp. I sat there for hours, my mind a whirlwind of fear and confusion. But eventually I realized what I had to do. I couldn't allow myself to be consumed by the darkness, to become a part of something so twisted and sinister. With trembling hands, I deleted everything. The videos, the documents, the emails. I removed the velvet room from my bookmarks and disconnected from the dark web. As I did, I felt a strange sense of relief, like a weight had been lifted from my shoulders. But deep down, I knew it wasn't over. The observer was still out there, waiting and watching, a constant reminder of the darkness I'd allowed into my life. I didn't know if I could ever truly escape it, but I was determined to try. For now, all I could do was hope that confronting the truth was enough to sever the connection, to free me from the nightmare I'd stumbled into. But part of me feared that the darkness would always be lurking, waiting for me to slip back into its grasp. The days that followed were a blur of anxiety and paranoia. Every shadow seemed sinister, every sound a potential threat. I tried to focus on my work and get back to a normal routine, but it was impossible. The presence of the observer lingered, a constant reminder of the horror I'd let into my life. It didn't take long for my coworkers to notice something was wrong. My boss pulled me aside one afternoon, his expression concerned. "You've seemed off lately," he said. "Is everything okay?" I wanted to tell him everything, to unload the burden of fear I'd been carrying. But how could I explain the dark corners of the internet, the sinister figure haunting my life, without sounding insane? I forced a smile and told him I was just tired, that I'd been having trouble sleeping. "Take some time off," he suggested. "Get some rest." I nodded, knowing that rest was the last thing I'd find at home. But I took his advice and took a few days off, hoping that a change of scenery might help clear my mind. I decided to visit my parents, who lived a few hours away in the quiet suburbs. I hadn't seen them in months, and I thought the familiar surroundings might provide some comfort. When I arrived, my mom greeted me with a warm hug. "You look tired," she said, studying my face with motherly concern. "You need to take better care of yourself." I forced another smile, reassuring her that I was fine, but inside, I felt like a stranger in my own skin. The anxiety was a constant buzz, a nagging sensation that I couldn't shake. That night, after dinner, I sat on the porch staring out into the darkness. The quiet of the suburbs was unsettling. Every rustle of leaves, every distant bark of a dog set my nerves on edge. My mind was a whirlwind of fear and paranoia, replaying the events of the past few weeks over and over. I felt trapped, as if the darkness I'd encountered was slowly consuming me. As I sat there, lost in thought, I noticed something odd. The streetlight at the end of the driveway flickered, casting erratic shadows that danced across the pavement. I dismissed it as a faulty bulb, but then I saw a figure standing beneath it. My heart skipped a beat. It was the observer, watching me with those same cold, empty eyes. Panic surged through me, and I stumbled back into the house, locking the door behind me. I peered through the window, but the figure was gone, as if it had never been there. Sleep was impossible that night. I lay awake, my mind racing with questions and fears. Why was the observer still haunting me? Hadn't I done everything to sever the connection, to escape the darkness? But deep down, I knew that facing the truth was only the beginning. The next morning, my mom asked if I'd like to go through some old boxes in the attic. "I found some of your old stuff," she said with a smile. "It might be fun to take a trip down memory lane." I agreed, thinking that a distraction might help clear my mind. The attic was dusty and cluttered, filled with boxes of forgotten memories. As I sifted through old toys and childhood drawings, I came across a box labeled School Projects. Inside, I found a journal from high school, filled with notes and doodles. As I flipped through the pages, something caught my eye, a drawing of a figure, tall and thin, wearing a long coat and a wide-brimmed hat. It was the observer. My blood ran cold. How could this be? I didn't remember drawing it, but the image was unmistakable. Beneath the drawing were scribbled notes, phrases like "the shadow knows" and "it watches in the dark." A chill ran down my spine as I realized that this figure had been haunting me long before I stumbled upon the velvet room. I took the journal downstairs and showed it to my mom, my hands shaking. "Do you remember this?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. She studied the drawing, her expression unreadable. "I think you drew that after the incident at school," she said. "You had a rough time for a while, but you never talked about it." "What incident?" I pressed, a sense of dread creeping over me. She hesitated, as if choosing her words carefully. There was an accident during a school trip. You and some other kids got lost in the woods. They found you after a few hours, but you were in shock, like you'd seen something terrible. Memories flooded back, fragments of fear and confusion. I remembered being in those woods, the oppressive darkness, the feeling of being watched, and then a flash of memory. A figure in the shadows, watching me with those same cold, empty eyes. I felt sick, like my entire life had been leading to this moment, to the realization that the darkness had always been a part of me. The Velvet Room hadn't introduced me to the observer. It had simply brought the nightmare back to the surface. I knew then that I couldn't escape it, that the darkness was a part of me, a shadow I couldn't outrun. The observer wasn't just a manifestation of my fears. It was a part of my past, a piece of the puzzle I'd been missing. Determined to confront the truth, I returned to the attic and searched through more boxes, hoping to find something that could explain the connection. Eventually, I found an old newspaper clipping tucked inside a book. The headline read, "Mystery in the Woods, School Trip Ends in Chaos." The article described the incident my mom had mentioned, a group of students getting lost during a school trip, with reports of strange sightings and unexplained phenomena. It mentioned a search party finding us, but it didn't mention the figure I'd seen, the observer who had haunted my dreams ever since. I realized then that the darkness wasn't just a part of my life. It was a part of the world, an unseen force that touched those who dared to look beyond the veil of reality. The Velvet Room had simply been a gateway, a catalyst for the darkness to resurface. With a heavy heart, I closed the book and returned to the porch, staring out into the night. The observer was still out there, watching and waiting. But now, I understood that it wasn't just a threat, it was a part of me, a reminder of the darkness I couldn't escape. For the first time, I felt a sense of acceptance, a strange peace in the knowledge that the darkness was always with me. I didn't know what the future held, but I knew that I couldn't run from it any longer. The observer was a part of my past, and now, a part of my present. As I sat there, I made a silent vow to confront whatever came next, to face the shadows and uncover the truth. I didn't know if I could ever truly escape the darkness, but I was determined to try. Returning to my apartment felt like stepping back into a waking nightmare. My mind was in turmoil, grappling with the realization that the observer had been haunting me for years, a shadowy figure connected to some forgotten trauma. I felt like I was teetering on the edge of a dark abyss, unsure of how to pull myself back. The observer was still out there, lurking in the corners of my vision, a constant reminder that my life was no longer my own. Every shadow seemed to pulse with a life of its own, and every creak of the floorboards made my heart race. The fear was consuming, like a living thing that fed off my terror. The emails started again, more frequent and more personal. This time, they contained images. Pictures of me taken from angles that made it clear they were recent and unauthorized. Shots of me in the grocery store, sitting on a park bench, even standing at my window. Each email ended with a chilling line. "We're waiting." I knew I couldn't live like this. I had to confront whatever was happening, but I didn't know where to start. I decided to return to the place where it all began, the woods from that long-ago school trip. I needed to face whatever darkness lurked there and find out why the observer had chosen me. That weekend, I drove out to the woods, a knot of anxiety twisting in my stomach. The sky was overcast, and the trees loomed like sentinels as I made my way down the winding dirt path. The air was heavy with the scent of earth and decay, a fitting backdrop for the confrontation I knew was coming. The deeper I went, the more oppressive the atmosphere became. The forest was silent, devoid of birdsong or the rustling of leaves. It was as if the woods were holding their breath, waiting for something to happen. I felt like an intruder, trespassing in a place I didn't belong. Eventually, I reached a clearing where the trees formed a natural circle. It was the place from my childhood, the spot where I'd first encountered the observer. Memories flooded back. Fear, confusion, the sense of being watched. It was all so familiar and yet so alien. As I stood there, I felt a presence behind me. I turned slowly, and there he was, the observer, standing at the edge of the clearing, shrouded in shadow. His eyes were as cold and empty as ever, and the sight of him made my skin crawl. "Why are you doing this?" I demanded, my voice trembling. "What do you want from me?" The observer remained silent, but his presence was suffocating, like a dark tide threatening to pull me under. I felt a surge of desperation, a need to understand why I'd been chosen, why my life had been plunged into darkness. And then, something unexpected happened. The air shimmered, and I saw a vision, an image of myself as a child, wandering through these very woods, lost and scared. The memory played out before me, vivid and surreal, as if I were reliving that long-ago day. In the vision, I saw myself stumble upon a clearing, much like the one I stood in now. I was drawn to something on the ground, a circle of stones marked with strange symbols. I watched as my younger self knelt down, tracing the symbols with trembling fingers. The vision shifted, and I saw the observer standing behind my younger self, watching with those same unblinking eyes. I felt a chill run down my spine as I realized that the darkness had been there all along, lurking in the shadows, waiting for the right moment to reveal itself. As the vision faded, I understood that the observer was more than just a figure haunting me. He was a manifestation of the darkness I'd encountered as a child, a reminder of the secrets I'd uncovered and the door I'd opened without realizing it. I turned back to the observer, my fear replaced by a strange sense of clarity. "I know what you are," I said, my voice steady. "You're a part of me, a part of my past that I can't escape, but I won't let you control me anymore." For the first time, the observer moved. He nodded slowly, as if acknowledging my words. Then, just as suddenly as he had appeared, he was gone, leaving me alone in the clearing. The silence of the woods returned, but it felt different now. Lighter, as if a weight had been lifted. I felt a sense of peace, a feeling that I hadn't experienced in years. I knew that I hadn't banished the darkness completely, but I had taken the first step toward confronting it. I returned to my apartment, feeling strangely renewed. The emails stopped, and the observer no longer haunted my every waking moment. But I knew that the darkness was still out there, waiting for me to let my guard down. For now, I was determined to move forward, to live my life without the shadow of fear hanging over me. I didn't know what the future held, but I was ready to face whatever challenges came my way. The abyss still beckoned, but I was no longer afraid. I had looked into the darkness and seen the truth, and now I was ready to reclaim my life. The days turned into weeks, and slowly life returned to something resembling normalcy. I got back into my routine, focused on work, and spent more time with friends and family. The oppressive fear that had clung to me like a second skin gradually began to fade, but the experience had left its mark. I had learned to live with the knowledge that the darkness was still a part of me, a shadow lurking in the depths of my mind. But rather than letting it control me, I chose to confront it, to face it head on whenever it threatened to overwhelm me. One evening, as I was winding down from work, my phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. My heart skipped a beat, memories of the cryptic emails flooding back. But as I opened the message, I found something unexpected. The message read, "The Velvet Room has a new truth for you." For a moment, I was tempted to delete it, to ignore the lure of the darkness that had once consumed my life. But I knew I couldn't live in fear forever. The only way to truly overcome it was to face it once more. I followed the link in the message, my heart pounding with a mix of dread and anticipation. The Velvet Room had changed. Its once ominous interface was now subdued, almost inviting. The categories were different too, focusing on tales of redemption and transformation rather than fear and horror. As I explored the site, I found stories of others who had faced their own darkness, who had confronted their demons and emerged stronger on the other side. It was a strange comfort knowing that I wasn't alone, that others had walked similar paths. One story caught my eye, an account of a man who had encountered a figure similar to the observer. He described his journey of confronting his fears, of learning to live with the darkness rather than letting it consume him. It was like reading my own story, a reflection of the journey I had been on. The message at the end of the story resonated with me. The darkness is not an enemy to be feared, but a part of you to be understood. Only by embracing it can you truly find peace. I closed the site, feeling a sense of calm that had eluded me for so long. I understood now that the observer wasn't just a manifestation of fear, but a part of myself that I needed to acknowledge and accept. By doing so, I could move forward, not as a victim of the darkness, but as someone who had learned to live with it. In the weeks that followed, I continued to find solace in stories of others who had faced their own shadows. I realized that the Velvet Room, once a source of fear and obsession, had become a place of healing and understanding. It was a testament to the resilience of the human spirit, to the power of facing one's fears and emerging stronger. I began to write my own story, sharing my experiences with the Velvet Room and the Observer, hoping to help others who might be struggling with their own darkness. It was a cathartic process, one that allowed me to reclaim my narrative and find closure. As I wrote, I felt a sense of liberation. The darkness no longer held power over me. It was a part of my past that I had come to terms with. I knew it would always be there, lurking at the edges, but it no longer defined me. One evening, as I sat on my porch, watching the sunset paint the sky in hues of orange and pink, I felt a presence beside me. It was subtle, a whisper of a shadow, but it was enough to make me smile. The Observer was still with me, a silent companion on this journey of life. But rather than fearing him, I felt a sense of gratitude. He had shown me the depths of my own fears and the strength I had within me to overcome them. I took a deep breath, savoring the peace that had finally settled over me. The darkness might always be a part of my story, but it was a chapter I had learned to navigate, a part of my identity that I had come to accept. As the last light of the day faded into night, I knew that I had emerged from the abyss, not as a prisoner of fear, but as a survivor. A testament to the power of facing one's demons and finding light in the darkest of places. And for the first time in a long time, I felt truly free.